50, as I said already, have died in intensive care units environments.
The government has approved paid leave for the partners of healthcare workers who themselves are employed in the public service. That scheme will be rolled out in the coming weeks. Further measures to allow childminders come into homes are being considered and may form part of an easing of restrictions next month. A man in his 50s was jailed for 8.5 years today for the repeated sexual assault of a 4-year-old girl at his home in Dublin. The court heard his name and address were published online with a message inciting violence against him and his family. Our courts correspondent Frank Graney has this report, which some listeners may find distressing.
This man's trial saw one of the youngest complainants ever to give evidence in criminal proceedings in this country. He was found guilty of sexually assaulting the girl at his home in Dublin between July 2016 and July 2017. His family had been friendly with hers for years, and the trial heard his daughter and wife used to babysit her. The alarm was raised during the summer of 2017 when the girl told her mother what he was doing to her.
And finally, large-scale outdoor events may not get underway until March or April next year. That's the view of Dennis Desmond, Managing Director of Promoter MCD. A number of high-profile events have already been cancelled this summer, and September's Electric Picnic has been described as a long shot. It follows the government decision to not allow events for crowds of more than 5,000 people to go ahead up to the end of August. That's it for now. More in an hour.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA. To help in these challenging times, we've reduced the cost of our car insurance. Get our lowest price at the AA.ie.
Staying dry tonight with clear spells, lowest temperatures of 4 to 8 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Hello there, you're welcome along to this evening's show. So she's a regular voice in the show. She's a former Irish rugby international. Fiona Steed is working on the front line. We're going to check in with her this evening and see how things are going. Wednesday night rugby, we will go through the James Cronin ECPR report with Rory O'Connor after 8 o'clock. Cronin banned for 1 month this week. It was all announced 1 month for what was deemed an unintentional doping transgression. We'll be talking about that. On the football show, Ben Thornley, regarded as maybe the best prospect of the class of 92. He was cut down by a tackle in a reserve game aged 18. He'd already made his United debut at that stage and was going very well, but the tackle made mincemeat of his leg, frankly, and he was never the same player. So we'll chat to him about that after 9 o'clock. And then Kenny Cunningham was in rare form this morning on OTB AM on the Culture Hall of Fame. He was chatting British comedies and he put in his entry, but frankly turned out to be an encyclopedia of all things British comedy and film. 53106 text number. At Off the Ball on Twitter. We have Richie McCormack along for the Newsround as ever. Hello.
Evening, Joe. How are you?
Very well. Nathan Murphy also with us. Good evening.
How are you? How's it going?
Very well. Kenny Cunningham was in rare form this morning. We'll bring listeners some of that. Bit of levity, no problem. And much needed, perhaps. Ultimately, his entry into the Hall of Fame was Fawlty Towers. Owen Sheehan, not overly in love with Fawlty Towers. A touch of slapstick about it. Wouldn't necessarily be Owen's style. Didn't love that, but was okay with the entry. Didn't mock it either. And Kenny made a very strong argument. But also in the midst of it all, went through, I would say, 3 decades of British comedies, which he has effectively been obsessed with and watched and loved and had loads of good stuff to say. Fawlty Towers, Rich, are we okay with that?
Yeah, Fawlty Towers is amazing. I don't know how anybody could have a problem with Fawlty Towers, even if it is slightly on the slapstick side. It's genius. Absolute genius.
Nathan Murphy, Fawlty Towers fan. We're taking Fawlty Towers. That's allowed in?
It's allowed. I will say, Joe, I can barely hear you. All I'm hearing is a great conversation out in the production box outside. So maybe we move on until we get me sorted. Though it sounds like a great conversation.
I love these moments on radio. What's happening here, listeners, is that Nathan is frantically struggling. He can't hear a bloody thing. It's all going on around him. He can hear the wrong side of the glass, and he's trying to let the lads outside know in as subtle a way as possible, which is not that subtle. It's his only way to let them know. They do know. Pete, you do know? I'm getting nothing from Pete. Richie, it's me.
Just Nathan's problem. Listen, the best part of Kenny this morning, you're washing over all of this, Joe. The best part of Kenny this morning was him eulogising over VHS while wearing the most fancy game headset of all. And moreover, the fact that we've had him on a video conversation, so I think it was at Zoom or Skype we had him on this morning, Kenny still doesn't use WhatsApp. Kenny didn't even have a smartphone up until about a year ago. This is remarkable stuff that we were able to be transported into Kenny's front room to discuss his love of all things VHS. It was just for us in Off the Ball Towers, a moment to behold. And him holding up a copy of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest on VHS, marvelling at the thickness of it as being a plus point was something to behold.
It's true. Full piece is up at offtheball.com, YouTube, podcast, all the usual places, but we'll play a chunk of it this evening. We will, as I said, talk about the James Cronin ruling and report with Rory O'Connor on Wednesday Night Rugby. And then Fiona Steed this hour will join us, who's doing actually important work on the football show. Ben Thornley. Richie, you remember the Ben Thornley name? It was kind of a hot young thing for
Ben
a long
Thornley's
time.
name sticks out for me. I remember him playing in that game against West Ham. I'm open to correction on this one. I'm fairly sure he played in that game for United against West Ham on the final day of 94-95 when Blackburn beaten by Liverpool, but ultimately won the league. I remember Thornley having a starring role in that game on Upton Park on Manchester United's behalf, and looked to turn the game in their favour and possibly win the league on that day. And like you said, an injury ensured that it never really happened to him to the degree that his undoubted talent suggested it would.
I hadn't realised he was so highly rated until today. I spoke to him a little earlier on. He's written a book a couple of years ago now, but he wrote the book and it was called The Class of 92 Graduate Who Never Got to Graduate, something akin to that. I'll get the exact title. I'll have it for the football show. But he had done an interview with David Heitner in The Guardian relatively recently, and Heitner opens with this extraordinary moment from the early 1990s, give or take, and this was when Nobby Stiles and Eric Harrison were very much forging the underage teams at United. And there's a Q&A type thing. Sir Matt Busby is there, all the United great and good are there. And Nobby Stiles is asked who the real prospect from this much touted class of 92 is. Who's it going to be? Who's the one? And he said Ben Thornley. And the overriding response everyone had was, well, surely you mean Ryan Giggs, who's actually already in the first team. And he said, Ben Thornley is the best I've seen since George Best in all my years at the club. The best I've seen since George Best. This is Nobby Stiles. He knows a thing or two about football. And Thornley made his debut at 18 years of age. Ferguson, in much the same way that he did with Ryan Giggs, showed up at Thornley's house and prized him away from Manchester City. I mean, literally showed up at the house with Brian Kidd. They got him signed, done, and away from Manchester City. And he made his debut at 18. And then the injury happened. He was going to play in the FA Cup semi-final. This was 94. United won the FA Cup that year. You remember Cantona scored the 2 goals, the penalties in the rain against Chelsea. And he was due to play in the FA Cup semi-final of 94, but was playing in a reserve game in the build-up to that. He was an 18-year-old running rings around various players older than him. A 28-year-old Blackburn reserve player put in a tackle, which he never admitted was to deliberately injure Thornley, although ultimately there was a payout later on. There was a civil action later on. And the short version is Thornley's knee was just in absolute pieces. I mean, they felt it was the worst injury they had seen in 20, 30 years at the club. And he came back. He even played, actually, weirdly, in the game where Roy Keane did his cruciate against Leeds. But he came back. He was never the same. He'd lost any kind of sense of explosiveness that you need in those first 2, 3, 4 yards, especially at that level. And hit a real low point. He's doing well now, but I mean, you can only imagine how difficult it must have been to have been mates with Scholes, Beckham, Neville, who all are on record as saying he was the best. He was the best. He was a level above us. To watch them all do amazing things over the following 15 years, and he was bouncing around a bit. He was at Aberdeen briefly. He was at Blackpool. It was just a distinctly average career by comparison. So he's on the way between 9 and 10. That's the Ben Thornley story.
What was his natural position? Was it? I recall him playing down the left.
Say again?
What was his natural position? Because I recall him playing down the left. I'm just wondering if he wasn't necessarily helped by the fact that he had a couple of big names in front from there.
I think central midfield as much as anything as well.
Okay.
He would have played a bit central midfield with Nicky Butt. He reckons Nicky Butt was the real when they were young as well. He was like such a prospect, Nicky Butt. Scholes was behind them all because his diet was terrible. Scholesy, after kind of year one together as a group, they were thinking not so sure about this fella, but he copped himself on and got things together. So I think he could do a bit of everything. But central midfield, certainly. He had memories of playing in the Milk Cup in Northern Ireland when they won that famously, and then I think he played in every round of their FA Youth Cup win. So he's on the way between 9 and 10 o'clock. Nathan Murphy, I'm told you're back with us.
Oh, what did I miss, guys? What did I miss?
Couldn't be repeated. Although we should give a little mention. We don't do this enough. We've talked about Kenny Cunningham from this morning, excellent, and we'll play some of that. We've been talking about Ben Thornley on the way on this show between 9 and 10. We had an interesting guest on Golf Weekly today, Nathan.
We certainly did. Golf Weekly of a Wednesday In fact, there's going to be 2 Golf Weeklies this week. That's how big Golf Weekly's got. We did yet again another big guest, Conor Moore, who's gone galactic. I think it's fair to say at this stage. Has his own show with Golf Channel.
Yeah, he's got a 20-show series over in the States. He's over in Florida at the moment with the Golf Channel. He's got 2 shows done, both of them free at the moment on Golf Pass if you want to check them out. It's interesting, I wasn't sure what he was going to go for, and it's a mix of the brilliant sketches that he does, tied in with almost Trevor Noah, John Oliver, looking down the camera as himself, making some wry observations about things. That's what he's going for.
Yeah, it's not what I was expecting, because people might have seen on social media last week from the first episode a Zoom call where he played about 10 different golfers, and it worked really well. And I thought, it's just going to be a sketch show. But actually, it is that traditional American format of him sitting down, piece to camera, which is quite difficult when there's not that rolling golf news, not many funny stories happening. There's no live action at all, but it obviously shows how highly rated he is. And it was every time you talk to him, it's fascinating to listen to the people he's met and the situations he finds himself in, because golf is such a social sport, and there is such a circuit of, I guess, corporate work and where all the retired golfers, all the current golfers find themselves. And like, he's literally met everybody in a very personal setting, like whether it's having dinner with Jack Nicklaus, it seems getting to see another side of Tiger Woods when they're recording ads. Obviously, he's working with Rory McIlroy now. Like, what he's done in the last 2 or 3 years is just insane.
It really is, yeah. He was saying one of the trickier things, and Richie, as a fellow radio head, you'll get this, is he's trying to do the monologue, but obviously the plans for a live studio audience have been cancelled. So he's cracking jokes to nobody but the camera. There's no laughter. And even when you're on radio here trying to do that on a very limited scale is very tricky. So he's trying to do this for the first time with that massive handicap. Because even if you're watching Colbert and all the lads now, Trevor Noah doing it from their apartments and from their houses now, the opening monologue is such a feature of those chat shows, late night chat shows, and without the laughter, very difficult even for the experienced ones.
I don't know, Joe. I've been used to making jokes and cracking wise in the office and in studio, not getting many laughs. So I can kind of, can sympathise with Conor a little bit there.
That's true.
But no, like it is like he is doing this at the worst possible time for everything. Like, you're doing a comedy show where you can't get a natural reaction. You're doing a golf show where there's no golf, and yet somehow he's still managing to pump the content out. Much like Off the Ball, Joe, he is a trooper.
And indeed, Golf Weekly, 2 Golf Weeklies. That's how many? 1, 2? Oh, 2 Golf Weeklies.
2 Golf Weeklies, yet again. No majors, but plenty of Golf Weeklies. And I'm wary of saying this, considering we've just had a technical hitch, and I know we don't like patting ourselves on the back. What, nearly 6 weeks into this lockdown, and we're all broadcasting from home. And I think when you look at some of those American television programs or some of the big budget programs across the water, I think we're doing a bloody good job. Have you watched Graham Norton?
Graham Norton, oh my God, it just
it
doesn't work.
Phoning it in.
Oh.
Like, he's cut his show to half an hour.
Yeah.
Like, even like last week he had Patrick Stewart. Surely you can still talk to Patrick Stewart for 20, 25 minutes. Clearly somebody has gone, Graham, you're doing that show come hell or high water, and he's somehow agreed to do half an hour. But come on.
I'll be honest, I don't think he can do those long form things.
I was just going to say,
you look at the actual show itself. It's not as if there's a bunch of straight interview questions, one after the other. There's a couple of bullet points. There's a bit of banter back and forth between the couch and whoever else is sitting there beside people. But I don't think he's the most natural of interviewers.
No,
he's a good presenter. He's not a natural interviewer.
You took the words out of my mouth. Who are we to criticise Graham Norton? Clearly, but as you said, invariably, like his show of late in the last couple of years, it has descended a little bit too much into now. Tom Cruise. Remember that story where you were in the shop and the funny thing happened? Go on, tell that now. And then Tom Cruise goes, oh, that one? Oh, God, how did you hear about that? Well, it's because, our agents talked 15 minutes ago and this whole thing has been planned, but I'll play along. It's become a bit too much of that, where he's obviously brilliant is reacting and slagging them and bouncing them off each other. But when it comes to, Tommy Tiernan staring into their soul via Zoom, I'm not sure he's the man to do a 25-minute, 30-minute interview,
No, he's totally out of his comfort zone. Like, I was shocked because I thought, like, here, Friday night, 9 o'clock in a lockdown, you want an hour and a half of Graham Norton.
No, it's not quite working. It's not quite working for whatever reason. So I've tended to abandon the last 2 fairly early on. He had Michael Bublé in one of the first ones. It was just this incredibly anodyne interview. It was just so boring. He's a legend.
Well, that's because you can't interview Bublé outside of Christmas season.
Indeed, Graham Norton's obviously phenomenal, but it shows it's tricky. Even you're right, Nathan. We're doing all right. Some of the Sky Sports connections to their various houses are not great as well. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah, yay us.
Yeah, exactly.
Listen, I want to praise everybody. I want to keep my options open after all this.
We're just coming on the radio to say we're doing all right. This is disgusting. Yeah. Right, let's move on. What worse again? Fiona Steed is going to be talking about working on the front line in about 15 minutes time.
I know. Yeah. There's every Thursday night when I'm going into the office, I've got stopped by the guards.
Yeah.
And I have to produce my letter, and I feel like such a fraud. Like, what are you doing? Is it an essential service? Well, we are picking Arsenal's all-time 11 with John Giles, which, to be honest,
yeah.
Well, all you have to do is mention John Giles and you're golden.
Are we the least essential workers? Genuinely, are we like us?
Let's not ask this question.
We're probably right down the bottom.
Do you mean within our building or within the country? I'd say we're right down the bottom, yeah.
Right down the bottom, yeah.
Yeah, bills to pay, Joe. Can you not broach this on air?
Okay. So let's kick things off then with the news round. Richie, where are we starting? What's going on today?
The National League Executive Committee and the FAI hope to have a final recommendation on how to resume the League of Ireland before May 5th. A meeting today discussed a number of possible options, including the season resuming behind closed doors on June 19th. Another option is a June 19th return with capacities reduced to between 25 and 50%. A deferral of action until September with either a December or February finish was also discussed. St Patrick's Athletic, meanwhile, say it's impossible for them to keep everyone at the club in a job when there's such uncertainty as to when the league can resume. They've been forced to temporarily lay off their playing and coaching staff. The Inchicore club say they've had little to no income in the 7 weeks since they last played a game. Meanwhile, Shelbourne striker Carl Shepard has told Off the Ball that there's a real fear among players that the league may not resume at all this season.
There is real fear there, and then as a player who's now 29 and played for maybe 9-10 years in the league, I'm looking at it going, will this affect my decision on how long I can go? I'm sure a lot of other players are thinking that if this goes on for another year or so, you're looking at it going, right, I've not played for a year. Will I come back and be really rusty? How long will I be able to train for with my team? So these are decisions that I'm sure are going through a lot of players' head. And as I said, they're not known. That's the problem now.
We'll bring you some more of that Carl Shepard interview on the football show. Meanwhile, Richie, the situation at Ulster Rugby?
Yeah, Ulster have placed their playing and coaching staff on the UK government's coronavirus job retention scheme. 70% of the club's 183 staff have been furloughed. Ulster Chief Executive Johnny Petrie says they'll continue to review the situation over the coming weeks. The province's last game was on February 22nd, and they're unlikely to return until late summer at the earliest.
Now, Michael O'Neill has made a decision about his situation with Northern Ireland.
Yeah, and I think this is off the back of the discussions with UEFA yesterday. Northern Ireland will have a new manager should they face the Republic of Ireland in the Euro playoffs. Michael O'Neill today stepping down after 8 years in charge. He had been combining the role with that of Stoke City boss since November. O'Neill was due to stay in charge for their playoff with Bosnia-Herzegovina and then subsequently Slovakia or Republic of Ireland should they win that game. But UEFA say the games are unlikely to be played until October at the earliest.
Okay, there's a text in. Podge Murray on YouTube wants to know if Nathan Murphy has lipstick on.
Lipstick?
You look very...
That's a bit disturbing when I do that, actually.
Don't do that again, please.
You have a hell of a tan. How are you spending your days?
Working hard. Working hard. You know, early morning run and a bit of football with the kids at lunchtime. Mm-hmm. I think it's just the lighting.
I'm not so sure. I think you look like you've been 2 weeks in Spain there.
Unfortunately not.
Surely Golf Weekly needs a name change, says Aaron. Well, indeed. What do we want to go to?
World's Greatest Golf Podcast.
Okay, done. Matthew McConnell, Jesus, the lad's putting the boot in on Graham Norton out of nowhere there. I know, that just mushroomed up. I feel like
I'm
a
worried
bit
now
harsh.
That's the headline that'll be put up on social media.
Yeah. No. It was probably a bit harsh.
It's just compared to his usual very high standards.
Yes, I think that is the point. Which, in
and it's the BBC at 9 o'clock on a Friday night. I thought we could have expected a bit more.
Yeah, that's fair. Joe, can you ask Richie whether he prefers the US or the UK office? I bet he'll say Peep Show, says John in Inchicore.
Yeah, Peep Show. If I'm picking something out of the three of them, I'm going to pick Peep Show. Peep Show's amazing.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd have Peep Show ahead of both.
Yeah.
You Peep Show man, Nathan?
I wouldn't say I'm a Peep Show man, no. I enjoyed it more than The Office. Yeah. But I'm not full of Peep Show quotes. I sort of moved on with my life. I would have been around Peep Show time, I would have been more in-betweeners.
In-betweeners, yeah. God, I have such a soft spot for in-betweeners.
In-betweeners I'd still go back to.
Yeah.
If I'm going to bed and it's 11:10 and you accidentally switch on E4 and it's on,
yeah,
I'm staying up to watch the rest of the episode.
Exactly, 100%. That and Peep Show I would always stay for if I come across them, which is most nights actually, in fairness. They're on all the time. So, news on the World Snooker Championship then.
Yeah, this year's World Snooker Championships have been rescheduled for the Crucible Theatre starting on July 31st, running until August 16th. The new dates are subject to British government policy regarding COVID-19. World Snooker say they will be willing to reduce the capacity of the Crucible or indeed play behind closed doors if required. The tournament was due to be in its 6th day today, but of course was postponed.
We had Ken Doherty on, Nathan, last week, and he was saying that, I was putting it to him, obviously I've never played a snooker at that level, that, really it would strike me it won't utterly transform the viewing experience if there's no crowd there when it comes to snooker. And he was saying that the crowd makes a massive difference. They just add so much, from a playing point of view, that is, to the sense of tension. Like, obviously, the round of applause and the oohs and the ahs, but even he said when they're doing nothing, just their presence alone adds an air of electricity to the whole thing. And I take his point, but they can absolutely do this behind closed doors pretty easily.
Yeah, and it is just how desperate these sports are to get the events played. I think snooker is one of the more straightforward ones in that, again, you just zoom the camera a little bit closer so you don't even notice that there's nobody else there.
Yeah.
But all sports are going to be affected by the lack of atmosphere, the lack of tension. It's like watching a game on television without commentary. It just doesn't feel right. It'll be the exact same watching games without a crowd. But right now, we will 100% take it.
I like watching games without the commentators.
Yeah, well, that's... Listen, we're in enough trouble as it is. Us commentators. Give us a break, Joe.
Okay, fair enough. So they're starting on the 31st of July. Ken mentioned that might be very possible because the BBC, and I suspect lots of television stations, suddenly have a 2 to 3 week sized Olympic hole of coverage in their schedule, and they need to fill it somehow.
Yeah.
So
China's the massive audience for this as well. They mentioned Eurosport and BBC specifically. Barry Hearn quoted them in his statement today, but Far East and China specifically is going to be the big market for them. If they manage to get the World Championships going in the middle of the summer when there's bugger all else happening, they're going to have huge numbers online, and I'm watching on TV for that one.
Okay. So the Newcastle takeover continues. There's obviously a lot of heat about this, a lot of noise.
Yeah.
The Premier League, it seemed, weren't going to raise any major objections. The objection has come from a not insignificant and unlikely source. It wasn't one we were talking about.
Yeah, the proposed takeover of Newcastle, as you mentioned, Joe, is a new objector. Qatari broadcaster beIN Sports has written to the Premier League and its 20 clubs, asking them to block the sale to Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Amnesty International has already written to the Premier League, highlighting Saudi's poor human rights record. beIN is almost 1 year into a 3-year deal worth €566 million to England's top flight clubs. Qatar and Saudi Arabia are locked in a bitter diplomatic dispute, and beIN have objected to the Saudi piracy of their output.
What do we think? Is this going to have a great bearing on things?
It's a good time, I would expect, for beIN to be raising these concerns, considering there's talk again this evening that Premier League clubs are questioning whether they'll be in a position to actually finish the season. So if beIN talk and the amount of money they're investing, and international rights are the only rights that are really holding up in terms of their value at the moment and increasing, the Premier League have no choice but to listen.
Yeah. Keys and Gray hold the Saudis. What a headline that's going to be. The path to redemption.
Richard Keys, I saw just before coming on air, has an exclusive that there is a second buyer interested in Newcastle.
Of course there is.
Is Keysy still blogging? Because I was a massive fan of that for a long time. I've fallen out of the habit.
He's still blogging, and it's still terrible. The one, it was after Karen Brady's, Karen Brady's column where she called for the Premier League to be brought to a conclusion almost immediately. Yeah. And Keysy had just an amazing diatribe against West Ham and Karen Brady in particular, most of which was alluding to stuff that he knows that he can never reveal, that he might reveal at a later date. But it's spectacular lack of self-awareness, is Richard Keys.
It's punctuated with things like, whoever he's writing about, it'll say things like, "Do me a favour, Karen," or "Come on, Karen." It's just great. So Robbie Keane was on Sky Sports today.
Yeah, he says patience will be important as he continues down the management path. The Republic of Ireland's record goal scorer is not part of Stephen Kenny's backroom team, but he remains number 2 to Jonathan Woodgate at Championship side Middlesbrough. He was speaking to Sky Sports, as you mentioned, Joey. He didn't address his current Ireland situation, but he does say it was inevitable he would get into first team management, even if he's not in any rush.
I've spoken to many people over, certainly in the last few years, that told me to take my time. don't be in a rush. I remember I was on holidays a couple of years ago and I had Marcello Lippi, who was my manager at Inter Milan. He's told me, Robbie, take your time. If you're going to be a coach or a manager, you could be in it for 20, 30 years, so don't rush into it. So I'll certainly take it in his advice. And as I said, I want to learn. I want to learn from different people and pick the brains off different managers and different players that I've played with over the years. And for me, this is a learning curve.
And Rich, did he not discuss the Ireland thing because he declined to comment, or was it just that Sky Sports were, I guess, understandably that uninterested in the situation?
I would imagine it is a little bit about, and I'd say there would have probably been a heads up beforehand that it's something he can't just, unless we get a notification from the FAI saying Robbie Keane's no longer in their employ, I don't think we're going to be hearing about it until then.
John in Dublin makes the not unreasonable observation that if they did go ahead with the snooker and there were crowds there, somebody coughing at the snooker would be like a cannon going off. The clatter of seats emptying. I mean, there is always someone coughing at the snooker. That's no joke anymore. That's a serious issue.
Yeah. In fairness to the snooker, they're used to, the players are used to playing in environments where they're you watch tournaments on Eurosport that aren't necessarily the World Championships or that aren't the I don't know, one of the big six tournaments that they have, and they're ordinarily playing in Clondunno in front of feck all people with six tables lined up side by side. So it's a situation that they're kind of used to. It just means that the World Championships loses a little bit of luster. But then again, Crucible. Yeah, Crucible only fits 1,000 people anyway. It's not exactly this mega dome that people presume it might be. It's like a fairly small diminutive theatre in Sheffield that they've just happened to call home for the last 30 odd years. But they are talking about reducing capacity possibly there, and I think that could be a goer for them as well. Okay.
Eugene has texted in to say he's happy to see that you've tidied your bed, Richie.
Thanks, man. It was my wife actually said it beforehand before I came on air that I had to do it. If you could see down to my right, there is a pile of clothes that will never make air.
Show us that then, and we'll see what your wife says when you go back downstairs. No, don't.
No, I want to live. I want to live, yeah.
So the Netherlands have decided to null and void their league.
Yeah, well, not quite. The Eredivisie is finished. Football in the Netherlands has been banned by the government until September 1st as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. The Dutch Football Association, the KNVB, are to meet with clubs to discuss the ramifications of their decision to end the season. When play was suspended, Ajax topped the table only on goal difference from AZ. Meanwhile, RKC Waalwijk were bottom of the table and were 4 points adrift of Alan Pardew's ADO Den Haag. So they still have to sort out the European commitments and whether or not there will be a title.
Okay. And then just finally, Rory McIlroy's come out on the Ryder Cup situation?
Yeah, he says he would prefer if the Ryder Cup was put back a year if that meant that matches between Europe and the USA could be held in front of fans. The event is scheduled for Wisconsin in September, and it's looking more and more likely that it will be played behind closed doors if it is to go ahead at all.
Increasingly, Rory tends to be a decisive figure in all these kind of things, Nathan, when he comes out, such as his stock in the game. And it's definitely heading towards, clearly we can't do this with a big crowd, so this is going to be cancelled.
It seems to have completely flipped over the last few weeks. If you think right at the start of this, we had Harrington on the show where I think he was very much open to, listen, we want golf in any form back, and if it needs to be behind closed doors, let's go with it. Where even Harrington has changed his mind to, no, if the crowds aren't there, this really shouldn't happen. And it seems all the momentum is with that. But then the PGA Tour just put out a brand new schedule last week with the Ryder Cup on it. But if the players refuse to play, and that's going to be the most interesting part of all this, they're on about June the 11th for the PGA Tour to start again.
Yeah.
If you're Rory McIlroy, are you going out playing? I don't think so. I think you'd wait and see the lie of the land for a few weeks at least.
Yeah, June 11th in Texas, they're hoping to kick things off. The PGA Tour have ordered a reported 1 million testing kits. I'm not sure the ethics of using up 1 million testing kits, but they're planning to try and do this from June 11th. Somebody wondering, what best 11 is John Giles picking tomorrow, Nathan?
I do not know. I had a missed call from him just before he came on air, so I'm going to call him now and we will find out. There was talk of Chelsea, of Manchester City, of Ireland, so we'll find out.
Oh, I think we should. I think we should build up to Ireland. Let's not rush Ireland. I feel Ireland deserves to be top of that mountain.
Do we do Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland? Where does this stop? Celtic? We'll have to do the Leeds team at some stage.
Leeds is a good shout.
Yeah.
Does he put himself in the Leeds team?
Yeah.
He absolutely has to.
Yeah, I think he does. Who's
getting in ahead of him? Olivier Dacour.
Well, weirdly, Olivier Dacour was the guy who came into my mind as well. Poor old Olivier Dacour. It never happened.
We should poll the listeners and get a list of teams we want them to do.
So we may do, I think, Chelsea tomorrow night.
Chelsea. Yeah, that'll be big recency bias there, won't there?
Chelsea.
Chopper
will
Harris
be
and the
one of
lads and
those,
Peter
I
Osgood,
think.
but you know.
Yeah, Chopper will definitely get in.
Osgood has to. His goal scoring record is fantastic.
There'll be quite a few from that team that beat them in the cup final.
Yeah.
Okay. Chelsea. I'll have a think about that.
Do.
Lampard gets in. Terry gets in.
Drogba.
Drogba gets in. Does Cech get
he?
in? Does Cech get in? Is there a stunningly good Chelsea keeper I'm not thinking of?
It's hardly going to be Dimitri Carrion or Dave
Benetti.
Yeah.
Benetti, yes. Yeah.
Does
So basically, this is going to be split between the 1970 Cup winning team and the last 15 years.
Robin, Makaleli?
They've had a lot of great players there that didn't necessarily have their best times, though, at the club.
Okay. Well, that will be tomorrow.
Duffer.
I didn't want to say, does Duffer squeeze in?
Nah,
Not sure. Gents, we are done for the Newsround this evening. My thanks to you. Up next, we are joined by former Irish rugby international and now very much working on the front line. Fiona Steed is with us next.
Ronaldinho. This time Messi is onside, and it's an identical chip from the young substitute. Brilliant! And Barcelona wrap it up in style in the Camp Nou.
Messi